Good morning, students. Let's begin with chapter number 5, Indigo. And this is a chapter, Flamingo, a chapter which delves into history. As you must have read in class 10th, that when Mahatma Gandhi came to India, he went to three places in order to solve the problems of the various people over there. And this is how he began with the civil disobedience and the non cooperation movement. In this case, Champaran stands as a distinct place, the reason being that it was at Champaran that he got an idea of Quit India and the civil disobedience movement. In fact, history says that the first victory of civil disobedience was at Champaran. So, this particular chapter and this particular place holds an important place in history where we come to know that it was Mahatma Gandhi who started to help the common people. So, how did he begin all this? Uh, he was asked by his biographer who was writing his biography, Louis Fisher, who is the author of this particular chapter also. He was asked by Louis Fisher from where did he get the idea of civil disobedience? And Mahatma Gandhi said it was at Champaran. So it was in 1942 that Louis Fisher asked him while he was writing his biography. And then he answered and he narrated the whole incident. And he said that the whole thing started in 1916 when he went to Lucknow. So you can see over here on the screen, I have made a flow chart. And this chapter is approached in a different manner as compared to the other chapters where we were reading. Here you'll find that I'll be explaining the reason that this is a chapter of history where the facts need to be in front of you. And after this, we can go through the chapter once. So you'll understand that after getting through all these points, you'll be easily able to get to the chapter. So let's begin. So in 1916, when Mahatma Gandhi went to attend the annual convention of the Indian National Congress, it was at Lucknow, and this is also known as the Lucknow session. You know that Congress had various sessions. So he went to this Lucknow session and he was met by a peasant, and his name was Rajkumar Shukla. Rajkumar Shukla, he met Mahatma Gandhi and he said that you come to me with Champaran because there is a problem which only you can solve. Actually, somebody had told him that your problem can be solved by Mahatma Gandhi. So he informed him about the indigo sharecropping. Now, before we continue with this chapter, we should know what was this indigo sharecropping, and then only we'll understand why Rajkumar Shukla was so desperate to take Mahatma Gandhi to Champaran. What is this indigo sharecropping? On the screen you must have seen I have written below indigo sharecropping, Indian farmers and peasants. See, the land in Champaran was owned by the Indian farmers. The Britishers confiscated the land, captured the land, and they turned these farmers into peasants. Now, what is the difference between farmers and peasants? Farmers work on their own lands, and peasants work on the land, but they get certain wages or a part of the crop or something, whatever is mentioned according to the person who owns that particular land. So, the land belonged to them, but they themselves were turned into peasants. Now, these British landlords signed a contract with the peasants, and that contract was that whatever land we are giving you this land on rent. Now, on this whole land, you grow anything, but on 15% of the land, you will have to grow indigo, and you will have to hand over this entire indigo harvest as rent. Now, why were the Britishers so desperate to grow indigo? Let me first of all tell you. Indigo is a dye which is used to dye the clothes. At home also, what normally is used to keep the white clothes white. You must have seen in Hindi we say it neel. And nowadays synthetic indigo is available. Earlier it was natural indigo. And natural indigo was a cash crop, and the Britishers got much money because of that particular and revenue because of that particular cash crop. And they knew Champaran was a fertile place and lots of fertile land because of the soil which is there, and they wanted to the Indian peasants to grow indigo on it, and they forced that on 15% of the land you'll have to grow indigo. They knew that these peasants would not be interested in growing indigo because there was two problems. One was that growing indigo made the land barren, so the farmers were not interested in growing indigo. And second thing, growing indigo was irksome, troublesome. So these farmers, they refused to grow indigo. Now the Britishers knew that unless if they'll not be forced, the peasants would never grow indigo. So they forced them that on 15% of the land you will grow indigo and you will hand over this entire indigo harvest as rent to us. Now they signed a contract. Now, as the knowledgeable students, you must be knowing that if a contract is signed between A and B, whosoever breaks the contract has to give compensation to the other. Like if A breaks the contract, he has to give compensation to B, and if B breaks the contract, he has to give compensation to A. Now, what happened? Germany developed synthetic indigo, and you know that natural indigo, of course, will be costlier as compared to synthetic indigo. Now, these Britishers did not require this natural indigo. They knew if they will break the contract, they will have to give compensation to the peasants. So, they did another thing. They told the peasants that we are freeing you from this contract and you pay us compensation. Now, should the peasants agree? You'll say no. But the peasants agreed. The reason you already know. They were getting free from this indigo, which was making, well, like it was being so troublesome for them to grow indigo. So as they were getting free from that particular thing and that rent, they agreed. Those who did not agree were forced to agree. Now till then the peasants did not know that this all was happening because of Germany developing synthetic indigo. When the whole compensation reached the Britishers, it was after that the peasants came to know that this all was done because synthetic indigo has been developed, and they understood that they have been cheated. They wanted this compensation amount back. Now, of course, the Britishers would refuse. It was 1916. It was the rule of the Britishers. So they refused. Still, the peasants, they approached the court. They hired certain lawyers and they approached the court. But you know, it was British court. So you can understand there was no justice. So it was like time after time passed, and the case was not being solved. Now, because of this reason, Rajkumar Shukla, when he went to attend the Indian National Congress convention, somebody said, go and approach Mahatma Gandhi, he'll solve your problem. Now he knew that it is only one person who can solve the problem. He wanted to take Mahatma Gandhi home. And this was why he was so desperate. Mahatma Gandhi said, now I have to go to different places. You can see I have made an arrow. After annual convention, you can see one arrow down. Now this arrow will tell you which places, and this side you will find whatever things happened there. So at Lucknow, whatever things happened there, you can find towards the right side of the page, and below it you can see this long arrow made down. It is towards Kanpur. So from Lucknow, Mahatma Gandhi went to Kanpur. Now as Louis Fisher was a Britisher, he has written Kanpur as Kanpur. It's Kanpur only. Then from Kanpur he went to his ashram, and everywhere to the left hand side, just see, everywhere Shukla followed him. And that's why Mahatma Gandhi called Shukla as resolute and tenacious. Why resolute? He has fixed up his mind that I'll take Mahatma Gandhi to Champaran. And tenacious because continuously he kept on working hard. He kept on following Mahatma Gandhi everywhere, wherever Mahatma Gandhi went. He went to Kanpur, he followed him. He went to his ashram, followed him. And every time he was just banking upon one thing, that please come with me to Champaran. Mahatma Gandhi was impressed by this resolute and tenacious nature of Shukla, and he said, okay, will you come to Calcutta on this date? This date is not told to us. So he said, you come to Calcutta on this date and we'll go to Champaran. So now students, in fact, we have done two questions. The two questions are, one is, what is indigo sharecropping? For a quick revision, I'll revise. Indigo sharecropping was where the sharecropping went on for indigo. The land was owned by Indian farmers. The land was confiscated by the British landlords. They turned the farmers into peasants. They signed a contract. In that contract, it was written that 15% of land you'll grow indigo and you'll hand over this entire indigo harvest as rent. Now, this contract was broken due to Germany developing synthetic indigo. And when the peasants, why did the peasants give the money, give the compensation? Because growing indigo was troublesome and it was making the land barren. So they signed the contract, they gave the compensation. They gave the compensation to the British landlords. Now, when they came to know that this happened due to Germany developing synthetic indigo, they wanted this money back. The Britishers refused. They approached the court, but there was no justice. Now, with this problem, Rajkumar Shukla went to the annual convention of the Indian National Congress, and somebody told, meet Mahatma Gandhi. So, first question is, what was indigo sharecropping? If you are asked, why did Shukla meet Mahatma Gandhi also? It is the same answer. Then the second question that we have done is, why has Shukla been described as resolute and tenacious? The answer is yet very clear. The reason is that he followed Mahatma Gandhi everywhere and continuously kept on asking him to come to Champaran. So Mahatma Gandhi gave him a date to come to Calcutta. Now, after coming to Calcutta, both of them boarded the train to Patna. Patna is the capital of Bihar, Champaran is in Bihar, and Patna is the capital of Bihar. Now, at Patna, whatever happened, I have written this side. At Patna, Shukla took him to Dr. Rajendra Prasad's house. Now, remember, Dr. Rajendra Prasad that time was neither the president of the Indian National Congress nor was he the president of Free India. It was 1916. He was merely a lawyer. Then why did Shukla take him to Dr. Rajendra Prasad's house? Because he was a lawyer and he could give him more information about the legal terms, like whatever legal action was going on in the court. Now Rajendra Prasad was not at his house, and his servants thought that Shukla is an untouchable, and this man who has come with Shukla also must be an untouchable. So Mahatma Gandhi was not allowed to touch the well. And Mahatma Gandhi later on wrote in his biography also, in his autobiography also, that I was treated as an untouchable in Rajendra Prasad's house. Now staying at Patna was of no use because Rajendra Prasad was not at his home. So they moved to Champaran. But before going to Champaran, he wanted to stop at Muzaffarpur. Now he sent a telegram to Muzaffarpur to Professor J.B. Kriplani. So now you can see here Muzaffarpur, and whatever happened at Muzaffarpur, I have written towards the right hand side. So now whatever we have done is from Lucknow to Kanpur, Kanpur to Ashram, Ashram to Calcutta, Calcutta to Patna. Patna, I have told you and I have written the clue word also, he experienced untouchability. Now he arrived at Muzaffarpur. He sent a telegram to Professor J.B. Kriplani. Professor J.B. Kriplani's role, if you must have heard, was he was the person who was the head of the Indian National Congress at the time of India's partition. So when India's partition was going on, it was Jawaharlal Nehru sitting there, it was Lord Mountbatten sitting there, it was Muhammad Ali Jinnah sitting over there, and it was Professor J.B. Kriplani sitting over there. So his role you can understand in history. So he was received by Professor J.B. Kriplani, and this date is given to you 15th April 1917. Because this particular date, if you have seen Lucknow, it was 1916 December. And now it is this which date? 15th April 1917. He was made to stay at the house of Professor Malkani. Now, Professor Kriplani made him stay at the house of Professor Malkani. Professor Malkani was a government servant, and at the risk of his job, he kept Mahatma Gandhi in his house for 2 days. Why the risk of his job? Because Britishers that time knew that Mahatma Gandhi was against them. So keeping such a man at his house just for 2 days was a great risk on his government job. He was a government teacher. In spite of that, he kept Mahatma Gandhi in his house, and that thing Mahatma Gandhi called as extraordinary. You can see over there in bracket I have written extraordinary. So these clue words will help you to recall all the things. Then at Professor Malkani's house, he was met by the Muzaffarpur lawyers. Now what did the lawyers come to him? The reason? They knew that Mahatma Gandhi is already fighting against the Britishers and he was also a lawyer. So they wanted to tell him that don't worry that we are not doing anything, we are fighting cases for them. So they came to Mahatma Gandhi to tell him that we are fighting cases for them, and they wanted to impress Mahatma Gandhi by saying that they used to take high fees. Now Mahatma Gandhi, he was angry and he scolded them. Scolded them for what? First of all, scolded them for taking high fees when the peasants were so poor. And the second thing, he said, why do you take cases to the court when it is just a wastage of time? You'll expect that there is no justice, it's a British court, and plus at the same time they will just give date after date. So it's just a wastage of time. He said, important thing is bring the peasants out of fear. And this is which you have seen I have marked in a box, and this is the first message of the chapter. Mahatma Gandhi banged upon one thing a lot. He said that we should not live under anybody's fear, whosoever's fear it is. When we'll come out of fear, only then it will happen that we'll become free. It was after this thing only that Indians started to fight against the Britishers. If they had a fear of the Britishers, they would never have fought against them. So when they started to come out of this fear, it was only then when things went right. So I'm stopping here today with important things we have read about this particular chapter. The chapter started with the Indian National Congress Lucknow session. It was December 1916. Mahatma Gandhi was met by Rajkumar Shukla. He was informed about the indigo sharecropping. I have given you an idea about indigo sharecropping. Then Shukla followed Mahatma Gandhi to Kanpur and his ashram. That's why Shukla has been called resolute and tenacious. Then from his ashram, he gave a date to Shukla and that to come to Calcutta. Calcutta, they boarded the train to Patna. They reached Dr. Rajendra Prasad's house. Dr. Rajendra Prasad was not at home and his servants, they considered Mahatma Gandhi to be an untouchable. Then Patna, he reached Muzaffarpur. I mean, he was going to Champaran, but before that he went to Muzaffarpur, which was in between the route to Champaran. After reaching Muzaffarpur, he was received by Professor J.B. Kriplani. The date is 15th April 1917. He was made to stay in the house of Professor Malkani, who was a government teacher, but he kept Mahatma Gandhi in his house for 2 days, and that is an extraordinary thing of Professor Malkani. Then at Malkani's house, he was met by the Muzaffarpur lawyers, and the Muzaffarpur lawyers came to meet Mahatma Gandhi to tell him that they were fighting cases and in turn they were taking high fees. Then Mahatma Gandhi scolded them because they were so poor and because fighting cases was of no use. It was merely a wastage of time. An important thing was to bring the peasants out of fear. And this is the first message of the chapter. We'll do one more part today. After reaching Muzaffarpur, when he met all the lawyers and everybody, he reached Champaran. Now, after reaching Champaran, the first place where he went, there are two places you can see. I have made this arrow. The two places. First one was the British Landlords Association. Now, why to go to the British Landlords Association? British landlord, you can understand, these are those people who have captured the lands of the farmers. They had an association. Now, why to go to this particular place? See, there is a problem between peasants and landlords. He has listened to the side of the peasants. Now he has to listen to the side of the landlords also. So he went to the British Landlords Association. There the secretary was sitting and he said, I'm not going to give information to an outsider. He refused to give Mahatma Gandhi the information, calling him an outsider. So Mahatma Gandhi went to the British Official Commissioner's office. You can see on the second side of the arrow. He went to the British Official Commissioner's office. The commissioner himself was sitting there. He bullied Mahatma Gandhi. And after bullying him, he said, you quit Champaran. You leave Champaran. Mahatma Gandhi said, neither am I an outsider, nor am I going to quit Champaran. And he proceeded to the capital of Champaran, that is Motihari. And all the events that happened in the remaining part of the chapter happened at Motihari. So I think so because of this flowchart, this whole chapter till here is very clear to you. From Lucknow to Kanpur to Ashram to Calcutta, Patna, Muzaffarpur, and after Muzaffarpur to Champaran. Then whatever is written on the right side, you should automatically be able to recall it along with the various places. Now in the next session, we'll describe what happened at Motihari. Thank you.